Today's episode is brought to you by the Daily Gardener Friday newsletter. You can sign up for the newsletter over at thedailygardener.org. Hi there, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, a podcast about garden history and literature. I'm Jennifer Ebling, and today is February 23rd. Today in garden history, we celebrate the birthday of Sir William Chambers, who was born on this day, February 23rd in 1723. He was a Swedish-Scottish architect based in London. William designed Somerset House on the Strand in central London, and he also designed the Great Pagoda at Kew, which was built in 1761 and was a gift for Princess Augusta. The Great Pagoda was built with gray brick and is 10 stories tall. It took just 6 months to build, incredible, and initially the various roofs of the Great Pagoda featured 80 golden dragons. But by 1784, the dragons were removed, and although they most likely deteriorated naturally from the elements, rumors swirled that they were sold to satisfy the Prince Regent's gambling debts. Scandalous. Well, William Chambers had a special admiration for Chinese gardens. He went to China on 3 occasions in the 1740s, and he even published a dissertation on Oriental gardening. And here are a few of his takeaways. This is from his piece called Of the Art of Laying Out Gardens Among the Chinese. He writes, "Nature is their pattern, and their aim is to imitate her in all her beautiful irregularities. The Chinese are not fond of walking. We seldom meet with avenues or spacious walks." He writes, "Their rivers are seldom straight, but serpentine. When there is a sufficient supply of water and proper ground, the Chinese never fail to form cascades in their gardens. The weeping willow is one of their favorite trees and is always among those that border their lakes and rivers, planted to have its branches hanging over the water." So there you go, a few tips on Chinese gardens from Sir William Chambers from the 1700s. And just a little follow-up here to the Great Pagoda that was built by Sir William Chambers. The Great Pagoda underwent a 12-year renovation period that began in 2006. And finally, on July 13th in 2018, the grand reopening revealed a fully restored Great Pagoda complete with 80 chinoiserie dragons perched on the roofs. The dragons were back. But since the roofs would not have supported wooden dragons or other heavy materials, the dragons were ingeniously made of nylon with the help of a 3D printer. Although the bigger dragons on the very lowest roof are made of cedar. Those were the only exceptions. So there you go. Anyway, it was also on this day, February 23rd in 1856, that Henry David Thoreau wrote these words in his journal. 9 a.m. to Fairhaven Pond upriver. A still warmer day. The snow is so solid that it still bears me, though we have had several warm suns on it. I sit by a maple, on a maple. It wears the same shaggy coat of lichens, summer and winter. And it was on this day in 1863 that John Lewis Russell, an American botanist and Unitarian minister, sent a letter to his adult nephew. By all accounts, John was a lovely man. He was a great conversationalist and a font of wisdom regarding the natural world. John Lewis Russell was an expert in the lichens and cryptogams that Henry David Thoreau just wrote about. In fact, the two were friends, and the fungus Bolatellus russellii was named in honor of John Lewis Russell. The letter that he wrote to his nephew on this day, February 23rd in 1863, illustrates John's love of nature and his personal charisma. Here's what he wrote. When this reaches you, spring will have commenced, and March winds will have awakened some of the sleeping flowers of the western prairies, while we shall still be among the snowdrifts of the tardy departing winter. As I have not learned to fly yet, I shall not be able to ramble with you over the pasque flower or anemone, nor find the Athronium albidum, nor the tiny spring beauty, nor detect the minute green mosses which will so soon be rising out of the ground. But I can sit by the Stewart's coal burner in our sitting room and recall the days when we gathered Andromeda buds from the frozen bushes and traversed the ice-covered bay securely in the bright sunshine of the winter's day. I will not trouble you to write to me, but I should like a spring flower which you gather. Any one will be precious from you to your feeble and sick old uncle and friend, J.L.R. John Lewis Russell. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Seasons at Highclere by the Countess of Carnarvon. This book came out late in 2021, and the subtitle is Gardening, Growing, and Cooking Through the Year at the Real Downton Abbey. Well, if you are a lover of Downton Abbey and gardening, like myself and my daughter Emma, then you must get a copy of this book. This book was written by the actual lady of the manor, Fiona, the Countess of Highclere, and she gives the reader complete access to the English country house and the garden. As with the fictitious Downton Abbey, Highclere Castle is governed by the seasons, which provide the backdrop to country life on this incredible estate. Imagine being a guest at Highclere and having the Countess, Fiona, be your host. Well, this book gives you that opportunity. Fiona Carnarvon is a generous authority on the history and the daily life of the castle, and she gives us in this book an in-depth tour of the gardens, the country folklore, the harvesting, the menus, the cooking with the fantastic recipes like baked broccoli with Parmesan eggs and the pineapple cake with vanilla icing, OMG. And she also lets us take a look at the spectacular entertaining with all the little touches. As you might expect, the photographs are beautiful. They were commissioned specifically for this book. And what is sure to charm gardeners about this book are the people of Highclere, Fiona and her staff, the incredible grounds, the traditions, the ideas. There are tons of ideas in this book. I was actually surprised by that. It's very relatable, and I know that sounds strange saying that because we're talking about Highclere, but it really was. The sheer pure enjoyment of the seasons makes this book special. And then finally, the love of English country life. This book is a big one. It's 321 pages of Highclere. It's not stuffy and it's not impractical, but it's something very special. It's authentic and unapologetically inviting. I might add that. You can get a copy of Seasons at Highclere by the Countess of Carnarvon and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for $25. Finally, today's Botanic Spark features George Bunier, who was born on this day, February 23rd in 1879. And if you're wondering who George Bunier was, he was a French-Canadian plant breeder and writer. And in the early 1900s, George and his young wife left France and they settled in Canada. They had dreams of prosperity and hopes of one day returning to their homeland. Instead, George and Julia spent the rest of their lives in Canada. In 1905, George purchased a homestead north of Edmonton in an area that was later named Rich Valley, and together he and Julia built a home and a way of life for their 10 children. Despite the physical toll of homesteading in the wilds of Canada, George did not let his classically trained intellect go to waste. In the spring of 1906, when he and Julia arrived on their desolate land, and I mean desolate, George thought strategically about the places on Earth that had climates that were as cold or colder than Alberta, and he began studying what they grew. He would get books out of the library, and the Edmonton Bulletin reported that George even sent letters to the French botanist back home, a Mr. Villemora, the Canadian horticulturist William Tyrrell McCown. He sent a letter to Charles Sprague Sargent of the Arnold Arboretum. He sent a letter to the Botanical Garden at Lausanne in Switzerland. And he even sent a letter to the Imperial Gardens of Petrograd, asking everyone to send seeds of flowers, trees, and shrubs that were found ripening in very far north places or at the highest altitudes in the mountains. And guess what? From everywhere, there was a generous response. In fact, it was so generous that they had more than they could properly handle. Well, George became a self-taught master of plant breeding, and whenever he had success, he always shared his work with the experimental farms and research centers in Canada. He was very generous. But there are 3 plants in particular that I think had significant personal meaning to George. When George longed for the plums of his native France, he began breeding cold-hardy plums, and the result was the Claude Bugnier plum that was named in honor of George's father. When George bred an apple, he called it the Paul Bugnier in honor of he and Julia's 14-month-old son who had died in a fire. But his most successful effort became known worldwide, and it is, as you might have already guessed, the Thérèse Bugnier rugosa rose, named for his sister. Thérèse debuted in 1950 after 9 years of trials, and it became instantly popular because it was so floriferous and cold-hardy to Zone 2. And today, I just checked, the Missouri Botanical Garden says Thérèse Bugnier, a hybrid rugosa rose, is a vigorous, dense, upright, rounded shrub that typically grows 5 to 7 feet tall and wide. Old-fashioned form, which somewhat resembles a damask rose rather than a rugosa, and it features fragrant, ruffled pink double blooms to about 4 inches across. The Thérèse Bugnier. Well, George Bugnier lived to be 102. He and Julia were lifelong devout Catholics, and in 1945, he wrote these words. As a plant breeder, I thought, at first, our location not at all suitable. Yet, out of every failure in those first attempts to grow hardy plants, arose the discovery that we had been led to a most carefully selected spot to manufacture special plants, possibly the hardiest in the world. Well, that's it for today's show. Just remember that you have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for listeners of the show. The next time you're over at Facebook, just search for Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend and then request to join. And if you'd like more of The Daily Gardener, you can subscribe to the newsletter over at thedailygardener.org. And don't forget that you can also show your support for the show by using the Buy Me a Coffee link over at the website or in today's show notes. This is Jennifer Ebling. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day.